7 of Voices of CX podcast, still bringing you the best thought leaders, practitioners, and academics of the industry, but this time with a renewed focus on the human touch. Empathy is our key word, and we're going all out on discussing how conversations can reshape experiences and your business inside and out. No matter how big your business is, what your challenges are, or your industry, connecting with your customers and their decisions is essential to leading through empathy. Hello, listeners and viewers. We are back with one more episode of Voices of Customer Experience. We're in season 7, and today I am joined by deBBie Akwara, who joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. She is the founder and principal consultant at Niche Customer Experience, Niche CX consulting firm. And she's got some amazing views about customer experience that we rarely hear on this podcast because we tend to be very Western focused. So this is a really amazing opportunity for me to open up that scope and that lens and take a wider view of customer experience and the way it's practiced all around the world. So deBBie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So deBBie, I wanted to start off this episode. Firstly, you and I have gotten to know each other through pre-calls and conversations, but our audience has not. So just starting off with you taking a second to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what's important to you, what your goals are, and what got you into customer experience to begin with.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So I am the 5th child in a family of 9. I started off.
I'm the 5th child in a family of 8.
Oh, wow.
So
okay. Right. So I had a rather, I wouldn't say unfortunate situation. I would say it's a mix of both, where after secondary school, I guess that's what you refer to as high school, my father wanted me to go to university to study law. Now, a requirement for law was that I needed to have a certain score in math, right? And I suck at math, to be honest. So I tried a couple of times. I tried a couple of times to have to take the exam and kept failing. So eventually I got to the point of having the least score above the F, right? So I kind of got into the pass category. And that was when the university at the time decided that for you to study law, you have to go beyond the pass and have like the higher score. I'm like, okay, I think I'm done with that. I'm done sitting at home. People who I should be with, my friends, they're like getting to the 2nd, 3rd level university. So I had to get in for any other course, and I went in for theater arts. And my father, so while writing the exams into getting to the university to study theater arts, I took up a job as kind of like a store manager for a boutique in my hometown called Warri, Delta State in Nigeria, right? And that was my first experience at being in the front line. So it was interesting for me because of 2 things. One, yes, I knew I needed to take, so it was a lot of things. I needed to wake up there in the morning, open the store, clean the store, arrange the clothes, look for exciting pieces to put on display window that would lure customers into the store. And as customers come in, asking them what they wanted, finding that specific thing, and then trying to sell 1 or 2 things extra, right, that would go well with that one thing that they wanted. And, so after that, I got to university. And after university, I was in broadcasting for a little bit. And then the show was pulled off the air. And I got into banking. So one of my fans, what's a better word, was in the bank at the time, and says, you're looking for a job. You do well in customer service. You have a great personality. You're a known face. You do really well. So I applied and I got the job in customer service in the bank. So that was moving from more of an informal thing to a formal frontline position in the bank. And I moved to head the department. Then I switched banks. So in switching banks, I was switching banks to still be in customer service. But my interviewer, who was the general manager for HR for the bank at the time, said to me, you're better suited in total quality management. I'm like, okay, let me give it a shot. I like new things. I like trying new things. Like, okay, I would really want to do that. And it was kind of a mix of what we now know as customer experience. But back in the day, we had no clue what that was, So I did that. It was really interesting. And that was where I really started to evolve. I wouldn't say evolve in CX, but where I really started to understand certain patterns and behaviors. So at the time, we were focused on customers being happy across all the touch points, not necessarily going into the detail of operations. And after we had a run through so we have this industry survey in Nigeria that KPMG does every year. And then the bank was ranked number one. It's been number one for like 2-3 years. So the MP is like, do we really need this team of 7-8 bodies moving around, monitoring service? Let's reassign them. So my team was dissolved. And I loved what I did. I wasn't happy about it. So I had the choice to choose what department I wanted to go to. And I opted for training at the time, learning and development. So I was there for a number of years, still taking in all the things that we had done, where we got it wrong. And I was put in charge of customer service trainings at the time. So I still had opportunity to design curriculum, kind of create that space. And I was also responsible for entry-level learning curriculum. What skills they needed against their job description. I had that exposure into that. Now, somewhere along the line, the bank dropped in ratings and they started looking for everybody again, right? So I had some ideas about, this is what has happened before. I came up with like a proposal. I told my boss verbally, my direct boss at the time, said to me, we'll put a proposal together. And she would send it to, we had like a senior level general manager at the time, who was responsible for HR and customer service. So I put it together, and then I was pregnant with my daughter, and she looked at it, sent it to our overall boss, general manager for HR and customer service, and she says, deBBie, this is great. Immediately you get back from maternity leave, you are resuming into this position to do every single thing you said you would do, right? So I thought that was good. So so I thought that was really good, like back from maternity leave. And by the way, she didn't have any experience in CX or TPM or customer service. She just had a passion for it. And this came into it was good for her that, somebody has an idea that, we can work with. So I went, had my baby, got back and got right into the role. And we implemented everything that we needed to do. And again, I had key learnings from the whole point of my team being dissolved. So I knew that it was beyond making customers happy at the surface. There were deeper things. So we went into specific products. From specific products, it pointed to people, it pointed to processes, it pointed to systems. And we went all the way down, at that level. And I was just a one-man team, by the way. And this is a bank across Nigeria with over 5,000 to 7,000 employees. It was just me on my computer and just trying to do things virtually. And with all the work that we did at the time, the bank had a strong service culture, but there were loopholes. Over time you relax and you don't enforce as many things as you used to. So we just used the approach of let's reignite the passion for service. Let's enforce some of these things, right? And the bank went up back to number one. And then my team expanded. And then along the way, they were like, okay, that's enough for CX. We're going to merge you now with HR. So I became, CX and the HR business partner at the same time. I was upset because I had a plan. But my mentor at the time said to me, deBBie, why do you waste your time and emotions? The time you will spend crying, spend that time in a quiet place and have a vision for your new role. Don't waste your time and emotions. So that's
amazing advice.
Yeah, exactly. So I went into HR as a business partner. And I started to see the connection between even your staffing, employee profiling, the whole point about talent management and how that plays out and the role that plays in CX, which we now call employee experience. I had no clue what it was at the time, to be honest. But, you put the pieces together and it all makes sense. And so another bank came calling, headhunting, to start their team. And I moved to that bank. And then, I wanted more. I felt like there was more to explore because when I went to the second bank, the issues were different. So in engaging the business, what I found out was it was a bank that had merged. It was a merger of two banks. So you had two conflicting ideas of service delivery. So we needed to create that one idea that represents both and represents the vision, the values, the goals of the business. So we did that. It was a different approach because this one I wasn't on my desk and on my computer. I had to travel around most of the regions, talking to customers, talking to employees. We're researching products, monitoring platforms, monitoring touch points, and just to get everybody to understand that look, this idea is the way to go. And we kind of broke the idea down. What does this mean for IT? What does this mean for finance? What does this mean for funds transfer or for the guys at the counter who are paying cash? We kind of broke that down. And in less than 1 year, the bank moved from number 16 on the KPMG ranking, moved up to number 13. So for me, it was unique because the first bank had a different issue. This bank, they had I was like, okay, so what does it feel like outside of banking? I wanted to know more to understand, is this the whole idea or are there different dimensions to business needs? And telecommunications, an opportunity landed. I actually took a level down. So I went from the head of department down to him, and I really wanted to experience customer experience management in the telecommunications sector. So I took on that job. That's where I had the real deal, like, okay, CX now is about the money.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So that happened for me. It was interesting. Yeah, it was really, really interesting. And then from telecommunications, I moved to education. Education for me was like amazing because it's kind of brought together all the experience that I have had my entire career. So I was director of customer experience for a company called Bridge International Academies. They build schools in low-income communities, right? I was director of CX for Nigeria. I was responsible for marketing. So once they establish a new school in a low-income community, they hand it over to my team to set up the school, find the customers, find the parents, community engagement, do marketing, branding, all of that stuff, and then recruit the teachers and recruit the manager. So it took me across training, HR, CX, I've done a bit of PR. It really did stretch me. So it's like I was working, in a business, only running a business within a business, you know what I mean. But the key thing for me was, from a HR perspective, it's never great to jump up. You're termed as you don't have staying power. So when I moved to telecommunications, I knew I still wanted to cut across more sectors, which is why I set up the practice, right? Set up a practice that can offer customer experience management services to as many sectors as I would love to. And that's been my journey. So I left paid employment, how be it voluntarily. When I started the firm, it was just trainings quarterly for CX professionals. And it was all based off of my experience. I wasn't reading any textbooks. There was nothing to it. It was just my story and what had worked for me that I wanted to share. So when the time came to leave paid employment, I thought, okay, let's give this a shot. And that was 2018, February 5th, 2018, if I recall. And I've been doing this ever since.
It's amazing because you've got so much experience in the trenches, but not only in one specific sector, across sectors. I mean, from banking to telco to education, there are so many different nuances that you have to approach. Like you said, when you're in telecommunications, it really is about so much about that return. Whereas banking, you worked in so many different departments inside these banks, or you were given roles that had multiple functions. So it gave you such vast experience on so many different angles or facets of customer experience, including the employee experience portion that you got in your experience in HR. So all of that experience was able to make you a really valuable asset for any organization that was looking to implement a CX program. And this is what you did with your consulting, right? So nowadays in your consulting practice, what methodology did you develop? What sort of approach did you develop that's really a game changer in your market?
So, obviously, it's obviously what worked for me while I was in paid employment, moving through different businesses. And when I took a step back to evaluate my performance in paid employment, something was very critical for me in terms of the place areas where I succeeded. And it was because first thing first was understand the direction of the business, which I like to call the voice of the business, right? So where is the business going? What does the business want to achieve overall? And then what is the customer component of that
Mm-hmm.
goal? Now, when I find out what the customer component is of that goal, I drill down to the current state of the customer's experience. So that it's kind of like a gap analysis. I want to see what this is the goal. This is actually where this is how actually customers feel now. You know whether you have a long way to go or you have a short road to travel, right? So that for me was the very first, and we call it the niche customer experience impact model intentionally because it's all about impact on the business, right? So we do the diagnosis. That diagnostics is done, and the diagnostics now. So what's key is I made some errors when I started in my career as well, where you are focused on the customer's satisfaction as a score and not the customer's overall experience so that the scores make sense. Right? So again, just evaluating that experience for me, it's like when you're getting that feedback on where the customer state is now so that you can kind of measure that with the anticipated state, it's very important to look at the customer's overall experience. So we kind of just look at, it's just about satisfaction and all. No, it's not about that. Even from the point of design, right? How did you hear? What inspired the design of the product? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that how the customer feels is a reflection of the purpose in which that product or service was designed. That gives you your product truth, what I like to call your product truth. Your product truth is what your customer gets out of it, not what you think it is. Right. So once that it's done, and you see your current state is customers' experience end to end across all stages of their journey, and then employees. Now, employee is tricky because in my part of the world, employers sometimes don't even want to hear what employees have to say because they're still trying to get a hang of the whole employee experience thing. So what I've found out that works is I come from the perspective of CX maturity assessment, which actually is the voice of employees, right? So employees are telling you, how mature you are from a CX perspective, and it breaks it down into 5 key areas, right? So once that is done, all that data is in. It is very, very, very clear. Number one, where the business is not doing well against what the goal is. Number two, what you need to put an eye on to make sure nothing goes wrong, well, aside from what you need to improve. So what you need to improve, of course, is number two. But the last thing is what you put your eye on, which is what we like to call CX matrix. So I tell professionals every time, when you go into a job role, you don't go into that job role with a preconceived notion of, I want to calculate CSAT, I want to know what the NPS score is, I want to know what the customer, you don't even know the business yet. Get to know the business. Right. And why I say this because so where this angle really became strong for me was in telecommunication education. So for education, we're measuring satisfaction, but that wasn't what was important to parents. The priority for parents was what we now call academic improvement score. Because what was important to the parents is, has my child improved academically since joining the school? So we had to create the academic improvement score, AIS, right? We were not hung on NPS. And now, because it's an academic improvement score, obviously it's not a CX KPI. The curriculum department, the guys who designed the curriculum, all of those guys now came into the mix, right? So the next thing is, when you get this right, you begin to break those silos. You begin to break those silos because people begin to see themselves, their importance, and their role in the customer journey. So that's really what I found that works. And when you are putting everybody together in workshop style, mapping journeys together, improving together, I have realized from my experience that CX is that function where your lips are sealed. The praise doesn't come to you, even though you are the initiator of the change. So I found that when I try to go like, I've done it, the next time I go back, I don't get support. Oh, you did it, but you keep doing it, right? But I realized that I know in telecoms, it's not as official. It's a rather informal environment like banking. right? So I realized that when I go, I send a mail to say we've achieved this to everybody with all the MD, CEO, everybody on there. We have achieved this. So the results, special thanks to this person in IT for helping, that person in marketing, they feel like rock stars. And they're like, deBBie, what are we doing next? Right? So, and then the next step now is how do we take that vibe, that positive energy, that vibe in the air and put that into a process? How do we institutionalize that behavior so that there's always a need to look inwards, evaluate, improve, measure, reward, penalize, compensate, and all of that? And that's just informed our approach when we talk about the niche customer experience impact model, because it's about the impact. I've said quite a bit.
Yeah, it really is. No, but you're absolutely right. It's very specifically about the impact and being able to not only understand but track how each of the experiences are impacting your customers, are impacting your employees, are impacting any of your stakeholders along the way is probably the most strategic portion of doing customer experience.
Yeah.
And that's why I struggle so much with CX practitioners that aren't paying attention to impact. Because what ends up happening is that sometimes we get so carried away in trying to help, in trying to improve, that we want to improve everything. And that's not possible. There's no organization in the world that will allow you to change everything at the same time. You have to have an order of priorities. And your priority, your highest priority, has to be the aspect of the experience that has highest impact.
I agree.
Right? So
Yeah.
that once you detect that impact, you can make changes, you know? So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm totally with you 100% on that. So another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, deBBie, really is the aspect of CX in Africa and the difference between practicing CX in Nigeria, in other countries, neighboring countries, versus practicing CX in the West. You know, the West tends to have a lot of thought leadership. It tends to be where there are the most authors, the most, let's say, celebrities when it comes to customer experience. And a lot of the ideas that make their way into other continents and other parts of the world have that Western style that doesn't always apply. And lots of times we see customer experience efforts failing because they're trying to copy best practices that work in other markets. So you and I had a conversation about this earlier, but I wanted to share this with our audience. Your point of view and your words stuck to me, and I wrote them down here, where everyone needs to find their own expression of CX. So tell me a little bit about the African style of learning, which I think is really important, and how you were able to take a lot of these Western concepts and translate them into the way that African culture tends to learn.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to approach this from two angles in terms of the practicality of CX, how it's done in the Western world, how it applies to Africa, and how we adopted it. And then also, I want to talk about from the perspective of customer experience education, which is an area that I'm extremely, extremely passionate about. So for the latter, I mean, we have amazing brands. We hear about them every day, we sing about them every day. We can't stop talking about them. We have Amazon, we have Apple, we have Disney, we have Zappos. Amazing businesses, amazing brands. But guess what? Apple was not founded in customer experience. Customer experience for Apple is different. And I've spent some time, I'm not going to say I've spent a lot of time, because I haven't. I've like to keep it real. I've spent some time just to understand. Sorry, Mary, I'm just like that. Okay, just to spend some time to understand.
No.
Right? And the truth is, they have put in the work to understand their brands, where they're going, who their customer is, and what they need to do to keep that customer coming back so they can achieve their goal. Every brand has its place. Every brand has its priorities, right? Now, if you are a business in Africa with different ideologies and different customer types, why would you want to think of just copying and pasting? And to be honest, in my opinion, that is why customer experience is taking so long in Africa to find its true expression. Because the people who are aware about customer experience and are driving customer experience keep comparing it to the Apples and Zappos and Amazon. Like, find your own voice. Find your own voice. Because the truth is, the Western world, you put in so much time. This has gone on for decades. Right? So we're moving from that place of customer service. And don't forget, the average African, we build or we thrive on relationships. We're like family. We have this kind of family mindset. So we're very anti-customer. But if we can build on our Africanness from that perspective, well, just imagine how we would evolve and blossom in CX. And which is why I talk about, I started doing this 3 years ago. My first article online was about, let's go back. Let's understand our customers. What do they want? So each business, understand your customer and what they want. And go back and look at your operation, how you design the entire experience blueprint. Does this match this customer profile or persona as a popular? Now we are mapping journeys, we're doing all of that, but what does that even mean? What does that even mean?
Right.
So we're missing the mark. And yes, I mean, I struggle with people that talk about CX and have no frontline experience. To be honest, I struggle because that is where the problem is. If you don't have frontline experience, hands-on experience, you cannot implement your strategy. So what this is doing for us in Africa is that it is making CEOs who are exposed to, as we call them, celebrity, well-known CX practitioners. It's making our CEOs, what's the word now? It's making them, resistant to CX because they feel like it doesn't work. It is fluff, but it's not fluff. It is not fluff, right? Now that brings me to the point around customer experience education. So a CEO thinks, and this is typical here. We like the idea of CX. We heard about CX, and I'm back from my trip. I want to start a CX team. I know you smile a lot. You have a good personality. I know you do the word "do well" comes up. Now, in doing well, you reassign that person to go and become the vice president, the chief customer officer, the head of CX. No experience in CX, and it's okay, right? But guess what? You do that, two things happen. Number one, you send them for global trainings that don't have local context. So they go for those trainings. They come back. Mm-hmm. It's all theory. It's all armchair talk. They cannot implement. They're fired. And then the second scenario is you don't want to take a chance or there's no local dimension. So the local dimension, that's my issue around education, right? So we have the way we learn in Africa. And while some of my African professionals always want to go Western, I'm an advocate for why do we have to change who we are? Why don't we just allow our authentic South Africans to evolve? We have a way we learn. Yes, it may not necessarily trigger innovation and trigger critical thinking and all of that stuff, but let's come from where we are so that we can embrace it in our own expression and give it our own expression. So that informed, and I had people reach out to me on LinkedIn several times. Oh, deBBie, I want to go for a CX certification. And I actually recommended a number of Western certifications, to be honest. I did recommend. And they come back with, doesn't work for me. I can't just go reading books and pass an exam. I want the knowledge. I want to be able to do something. And, I hear all kinds of stuff. I said to myself, okay, why are you looking for a solution that you can provide? So I just took all this feedback from friends who are, I have friends who are in very senior positions in CX in their businesses. They're not necessarily called heads of CX, but they're doing amazing stuff. And I say to them, you guys are killing this thing. Don't worry about whether it's CX or anything. Celebrate your internal wins and just keep going. So I've had sessions with all these guys and came up with a curriculum that blends the African approach to learning and also records the whole CX thing, to be honest, the whole concept of CX Western, right? We've done it our own way all these years.
Yes.
So how do we create that balance so that even if you decide to go out of the country, decide to go up west to get a job, you're not in the dark, right? You are aware of some things. So Africans, we learn, we focus on facts first. Theory, get it right. We do memorize, yes. Right. And then for you guys, you're more about, the triggers, to get your brains working, critical thinking, and all innovation and stuff. So for us, it was a case of, let's lay the foundation with the theory and the facts, and then we now introduce capstone projects. So you've done all of those things. We're going to create a capstone project for you with an actual problem in your business that you are going to solve. So let's see you translate your theory into practical, and then the conversations that we have during the program are conversations about brands that are here, everyday brands, right? So we do both. And we have, global platforms that we have connected with to administer some of the modules, right? And what we've done again is, rather than have a one-size-fits-all, or you being disqualified by not being have not gone a certain level up, we have created 3 levels, kind of like you have 6 Sigma, right? So we have the entry level. If you're a team lead or a supervisor, you want to just evolve in your role, whether you're in sales, and then we explore. So sales, marketing, customer service, customer support, operations, IT, you can do it, right? Now we have for business managers, and then we have for business leaders. So your heads of CX, your VPs, your CCOs, all of that stuff falling there. Then we have people such as myself, consultants, right? That want to have a practice. You're aspiring to have a practice. So we have that we have that for them as well. And we're introducing things like, your consulting business model canvas. So it's still the same thing, but how do we, for me, there's so much work to do in Africa. So I'm very passionate about it. Well, the deBBie is on fire. I'm very passionate.
It's amazing.
I'm very passionate about it. deBBie can't do the work alone.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem sharing my knowledge. We need more consultants in Africa that are ready to do the work, to say, this is the customer experience framework, if we need one, that works best for Western Africa, for South Africa, for East Africa, for North Africa. I recently learned about a European group that has come together, have their own customer experience. I'm so excited. I've never seen it before. I thought I was just the only person thinking I needed to stand out, because we've just been driving the CX space for West Africa. And I was amazed, we need more of that. We need, when we're talking about global CX leaders, who there is local representing. That's where we now begin to see the true color and the real appreciation for CX. Well, not even started. It's just one view.
Yes. Yeah, it's really amazing to see local markets and what they're doing around customer experience. Like you talked about the European customer, I think it's called EOCX or something like that.
Yeah.
I know that in Brazil, there's an amazing group called ACX, which is Amigos do CX, the friends of CX. And now they've actually become a part of the CXPA. So they're the Brazilian arm, let's say, of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. But it's hyper relevant to that local market. So what they're doing is they'll take those concepts that are coming from abroad and they're applying it to the reality of the country and the culture. So, for instance, I remember, so the listeners on this podcast know that I grew up in South America. And it's really interesting when you try to apply that reality of customer service, for instance. You try to apply that to an underdeveloped country like Brazil and South America, and these people are saying, "Oh, you just have to comp their purchase. You just have to say thank you so much. Don't worry, we're going to cover this. No expense to you. Carry on." We can't do that. That's impossible. That doesn't even work. A company can't accrue that kind of cost in their operation. So there are so many little nuances that wouldn't even make sense in the US market or in the European market because our reality is still so different.
Absolutely.
So these local chapters, these local organizations, they're so important to the continuity of customer experience as a global concept. Is that concept of putting the customer first. But they truly tend to work better in markets that are competitive, right?
Yeah.
And what you lots of times find is that in different countries, you don't have as fierce a competition. Sometimes you have one player. Sometimes, depending on the country, you have a state-run company that takes care of that, and it becomes a lot more difficult to implement a lot of these concepts. So I am really excited about the work that you're doing. And I urge our international community to feel inspired by deBBie's passion and go and do the same for your community. And call deBBie, message her on LinkedIn, and get some tips.
It's done. Yeah.
Yeah, because
and
this
they're not
passion
tips.
that you
Mary,
have,
they're not tips. Mary, they're not tips really. It's just following the beat, following the tempo of your country. There's no that's the beautiful thing. There's no, like I tell, even in one of the reasons why we're even struggling, specifically in Nigeria, we're struggling with CX because we're trying to catch up with the Western world, but we haven't sorted out as little as our channels.
Yeah.
We haven't sorted out our products. We haven't sorted out interactions. And we're not talking AI, we're talking so much. We're struggling.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're struggling because we haven't allowed ourselves to grow. We haven't allowed us to crawl and, into walking, and we're just trying to run.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. We tend to be very nearsighted when we are in the US, where all we see is the reality of what things are like in America. And we fail to understand that the problems that we have here, in so many senses, truly are first world problems, when in other places, we're still building the foundation of customer experience. But there is an advantage. And that advantage is that in the US and in Europe, where we had to have that learning curve of what works in customer experience, now these markets are over here. Emerging markets can go from here to here. They don't have to have that same learning curve,
Exactly. That's the thing. And this is the beautiful thing. If we don't have the same learning curve and we make our own mistakes and learn our own, we're all learning from each other.
Yes.
But that's not happening now because all the focus of CX, and I've had confrontations from CX professionals that I'm not going to call any names, right? People that I've been following for a while do stuff to me in a DM, and I'm like, okay, is CX like a Western thing, right? The concept of CX is a Western thing, but I don't allow myself to be distracted by all those things. That's not why I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm doing this because it's my purpose, what I really want to do. There's a long-term vision. And the business is not deBBie Consulting Firm, right? It's niche for a reason. And we have, just to let you know this, we have grown into 3 different businesses. So we now have the niche customer experience company as a group of companies, under which there's the consulting business, there's the Institute of Learning. Because you see, this learning, the education has to happen. Yeah. We want somebody who wants to go into manufacturing a local product to say, niche Institute of CX and Innovation, can you help me go to market? I will take you on board for 2 weeks. How to be hands-on, conducting customer interviews for focus groups, coming up with your product, prototyping, coming up with your MVP. Money is also learning for us. That's why we removed it. The certification program, Africa is our target. We want Africans to be knowledgeable. And we are looking for case studies. We are trying to gather cases. I'm very up and about on LinkedIn because I want to know people who have case studies in Africa. Let's share our stories. Yeah. Let's share our stories, right? And what we do, and then the third business, which we have just launched, where I am co-founder and CCO, is a technology business where we are working on customer experience. And it's from problems we have seen with clients, right? So we have SMEs who can't afford us, but they need our services. Yeah. So what can we give them on a subscription basis, working with their disposable income? Yeah. All these things you don't get mapping journeys and you have to get into the work. You have to. We do pro bono work for SMEs. We do that so we can learn. Yeah. Right? It's going to outlive me. It's not about deBBie. It's a call. So every African who is in CX space, who's listening, or if you're not an African and you believe in this whole drive of us finding expression, yes, the frameworks are good, the identify. I even wrote a book about CX metrics being 5, right? So I'm one of the guilty ones. And I tell people every time, I'm like, if I say something today, check me 5 years to come, because customer behavior is changing. Businesses are changing. So I may undo what I have said, and it's okay. That's what I love about customer experience. It lets me live and eat and sleep outside the box.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that a huge portion of this, and it's something that I am an advocate of, is that our job in customer experience is keeping up with these changing expectations and keeping up with the changing markets, because or else we get left behind in a heartbeat. deBBie, this was such an important conversation. It was so valuable. If any of our listeners do want to connect with you, either to have a conversation or just to follow your work, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, I'm most active on LinkedIn, to be honest. That's like home for me, At LinkedIn, and the next to LinkedIn is Instagram, but still the same name, deBBie Akwara.
Awesome. So I urge everybody to follow deBBie, because there definitely is a refreshing perspective that she's bringing to the table. And, we're talking about the CX community in Africa learning from the West, but there's so much that the West has to learn from Africa, from South America, from the APAC region, from so many different places in the world. And we need to get out of that bubble. We need to look beyond what our limitations are and expand that point of view. So thank you for coming here. It was so great to be able to have your perspective on here. Awesome.
Thank you.
That's our show. Thanks for joining us. We hope we've brought you one step closer to leading through empathy. It's our way of making the world a better place, one business at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know as soon as we publish a new episode. Voices of CX is brought to you by Worthix. I'm Mary Drummond. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, edited and co-produced by Steve Barry. See you next week.